I said, this is genius. Putin declares a big portion of the Ukraine. Putin declares it as independent. Oh, that's wonderful.
Oh, that's wonderful. Now that's Donald Trump doing what he actually does best, defending Vladimir Putin, his lovely Russian daddy, someone who he could not stop complimenting when he was president, someone he couldn't stop complimenting before he became president. And it's kind of incredible because what he's referring to there, what he's responding to is the escalation by Vladimir Putin in this conflict with Ukraine. We'll get to more details about that in just a second. But he just went on to really puff up his chest and make himself out to be the individual who would have put an end to this conflict from the get-go, okay? Before we get to those videos, just a little bit more context. So Putin, this is what he's responding to. Putin recognized the breakaway Ukrainian regions of Donetsk and Luhansk as independent and used this as a pretext to send peacekeeping forces into the regions in what is a violation of Ukraine's sovereignty. President Joe Biden announced sanctions against Russia in response. We'll be talking about that in a lot more detail later on in the show. We're gonna have a historian on, someone who's an expert on this very issue. But for now, let's get to some more sound featuring Donald Trump and his defense of Vladimir Putin.
So Putin is now saying it's independent, a large section of Ukraine. I said, how smart is that? And he's gonna go in and be a peacekeeper. That's the strongest peace force. We could use that on our southern border. That's the strongest peace force I've ever seen. There were more army tanks than I've ever seen. They're gonna keep peace all right.
First off, obviously Putin is not sending troops to Ukraine on a peacekeeping mission. That is ridiculous. In order for it to be a peacekeeping mission, you would need the government to consent to it, to want to have that happen. Obviously, the Ukrainian government does not want Russia or Putin to send troops across its border. Like, it's ridiculous to refer to it as a peacekeeping mission. I mean, Trump knows that. I don't think that he's that stupid, right? But listen to what he was suggesting there. Oh, maybe we need that on our border. Yeah, maybe we need another country to invade through our southern border against our will, as long as they claim they're doing it as a peacekeeping mission. Like, what? I mean, this guy is incredible. But honestly, that was the least ridiculous part of what he had to say during this interview. And this was on some random dude show, the Sexton show. And he also puffed up his chest and made it seem as though he would be the one who could find a real solution to this conflict, end the conflict before it would even begin. Let's watch.
Well, what went wrong was a rigged election. And what went wrong is a candidate that shouldn't be there. By the way, this never would have happened with us. Had I been in office, not even thinkable. This would never have happened. But here's a guy that says, I'm gonna declare a big portion of Ukraine independent. He used the word independent. And we're gonna go out and we're gonna go in and we're gonna help keep peace. You gotta say that's pretty savvy. And you know what the response was from Biden? There was no response. They didn't have one for that. Now it's very sad.
Okay, so first off, Biden did respond with sanctions. There's sanctions that are supposed to specifically target oligarchs and people in positions of power in Russia. I was actually a little surprised at how mild Biden's response has been in response to Putin, giving this speech, announcing two parts of Ukraine, which have been annexed essentially as independent states. So I thought Biden might actually act irrationally to that and further escalate this conflict, which of course we don't want, okay? We want to find a way to prevent a potential hot war. So I was happy to see that Biden was willing to be a little more measured in his response to Putin. Now, that is obviously going against the grain from what we've seen from the Biden administration so far in honestly escalating the conflict with Russia. And yes, I will admit Russia has not been innocent, but nonetheless, Putin did something that further provoked this situation. Biden responded in a relatively measured way, but to say that Biden didn't do anything in response is ridiculous. Now let's get to the point that Trump is trying to make here, that of course there has to be a moment where he airs his grievances about the 2020 election because he's a loser and can't accept the fact that he's a loser. So he uses any and all opportunities to bring that up, the election. You know, the election was rigged, it was stolen from me, I can't accept the fact that I'm incompetent, I'm a loser, I failed the American people when it came to responding to a pandemic, and they voted me out of office. But then he kind of talks about how he would handle this so much better than Biden did. Now, there's a little kernel of truth to what Trump is saying in regard to preventing, the situation that we're seeing today. And what I mean by that is, remember, Donald Trump did Putin's dirty work for him. When Congress had appropriated military funding for Ukraine, Donald Trump illegally withheld that military funding until Ukraine would announce some sham investigation into the Bidens. That was the first reason why Donald Trump was impeached. Remember that. So it's not like Trump would be in office and would serve as someone who would counter Putin. He would work along with Putin. He would do the dirty work for Putin. In fact, he was so complimentary toward Putin both before his presidency, during his presidency, and as you guys can see, after his presidency. In 2013, for instance, Trump wondered on Twitter if the Russian autocrat would attend his Miss Universe pageant in Moscow and whether the two would become best friends. Putin did not show up. Very sad, very sad. In the following years, Trump repeatedly spoke highly of Putin's strategic acumen, noted the strongman's intention to rebuild the Russian Empire, and defended Putin's habit of killing dissidents and journalists, arguing that the United States does the same thing. So while Trump likes to posture as like this tough guy, in reality, it's not about being a tough guy for Trump. It's all about cowering to his daddy, Putin. Like that's just who Trump is. He loves strongmen, there's no question about it. In office, he sided with Russia over US intelligence agencies and accepting Russia's claims not to have been involved in election interference. Trump subsequently claimed without evidence and at odds with all the evidence gathered by US intelligence officials that it was Ukraine. It was Ukraine, not Russia, that had interfered in the 2016 election. In Trump's elaborate conspiracy theory, Ukraine did this in order to frame Russia. So again, there's a little kernel of truth to what Trump says. He would handle it differently. It's just that he wouldn't counter Putin, he would enable Putin, much like he did with the Turks. I mean, Donald Trump enabled Erdogan by pulling US troops out of Syria to pave the way for the Turkish military to come in and slaughter the Kurds, the very individuals who assisted us in taking down ISIS. That's who Trump is. He cowers to strongmen. That's what he loves to do. He loves whoever the strongman daddy is, like it's like the soup du jour, right? It's whoever that person is that's dominating the news on any given day, Trump will defend them. It's pretty incredible. I actually want to get to this next video though, because while Trump, again, loves to posture as this strong man, as someone who is respected by the international community, just want to remind you of what a laughingstock Trump and his administration was. Here's one example. This was in 2018 as he was speaking before the United Nations, and he made a statement that was so ridiculous that world leaders had to respond the way that you would expect anyone to respond to this insane statement. Let's watch.
In less than 2 years, my administration has accomplished more than almost any administration in the history of our country. America's so true. Didn't expect that reaction, but that's okay.
It's incredible how much this guy is delusional enough to think that he's somehow better on foreign policy. And let me be clear, I'm not a fan of many decisions that the Biden administration has made in regard to foreign policy. I've been critical in the way that they've responded to Russia in this entire situation. They keep claiming that they're approaching this from a standpoint of diplomacy, but that is not the case. Rather than finding ways to really de-escalate this, I've seen escalation day in, day out, pretty like insane claims day in, day out that has only led to provoking the situation that we're seeing now in eastern Ukraine. Okay, I'm not saying that Putin's a good guy. I'm not saying that Putin has done nothing wrong. However, for a party that claims they love to go high when others go low, they're unwilling to bend at all when it comes to some of the provocations that they're engaging in. Provocations that inflame the relationship with Russia. And I'm not saying we need to be best friends with Putin. I'm not saying that we need to constantly collaborate and work with Russia, although when it comes to the climate emergency, a case can be made that we probably do need to work not only with Russia, but with other adversaries, China, for instance. But when you consider the fact that you're dealing with a nuclear power, when you consider the fact that Ukraine does not have the military capability necessary to really fight off Russia, and when you consider the fact that Biden's like, I'm not gonna send in troops to Ukraine, but I'm gonna do all these other things that inflame the situation, I would argue that Biden hasn't handled it well. But to make an argument that Trump would handle it better is ridiculous. The only thing Trump would do is enable the worst possible motives that Putin might have. It's just the truth.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.